Passing by some historic buildings in the center of Osijek, few people are aware of the fact that their original owners were Jews. Prior to their extermination in the Holocaust, Jews comprised more than 10% of the town's population. Throughout the 19th and the 20th century, they greatly contributed to the development of economy and civil life. Unfortunately, nowadays many people don't even realize that the Holocaust didn't just occur in Auschwitz or in Germany, but also in the streets that they pass daily. My name is Tomislav. I'm a history teacher, and in this video I'll take you along the traces of Jewish heritage and multi-ethnic Osijek which perished in World War II. The first two Jewish families, surnamed Hirschel, were recorded in Osijek in the mid-18th century, at the time of the Habsburg monarchy. After the centuries of discrimination, the position of Jews in the society slowly started improving from the reign of Emperor Joseph II. He was the one who alleviated the relation to Jews by means of the Edict of Tolerance. According to the edict, however, the Jewish languages, both the written Hebrew and the spoken Yiddish, were to be replaced by the national languages of the empire. As a result, Jewish surnames in Croatian lands mostly started sounding like German. In the mid-19th century, the Hungarian parliament allowed Jews to establish factories, shops, or craft workshops, as well as to purchase real estates in free and royal towns. As a result, Jews began arriving to Osijek in a greater number. They also inhabited the surrounding villages, and their number was growing steadily until World War II. Almost exclusively, it was Ashkenazi Jews who settled in eastern Croatia, coming from different parts of the Habsburg monarchy. It was also mid-19th century when Osijek Jews founded their first community and school, built a synagogue, and obtained land for the cemetery. The period after the establishment of Austro-Hungarian monarchy in 1867 was extremely fruitful for the town's development. It was when railway and horse tram were introduced and civil life began to flourish. At the turn of the century, new representative buildings were constructed, such as the famous Secession Row in European Avenue. At that time, people of different ethnic groups, Germans, Croats, Hungarians, Serbs, Jews and others, literally lived door to door in all parts of the town. Only a few Jewish families in Osijek were Orthodox, but all of them were aware of their descent and celebrated Jewish holidays. It was the time when the most common language in Osijek was German. Until the breakup of Austro-Hungarian monarchy, the most of Osijek Jews also spoke German at home. Most Jews lived in Upper Town, today's center of Osijek, but it is interesting that another Jewish community operated in Lower Town. Similarly, Osijek was one of few towns with two synagogues. In addition, several Jewish organizations were active, and the events they organized often attracted non-Jewish audience too. The most of Osijek Jews used to deal in trade and crafts, but after 1880 they increasingly became lawyers, doctors, bankers, professors, teachers or industrialists. The influence of Osijek Jews was also significant for the startup of some factories that resulted in brand names which are still recognized on the Croatian market. Yet, contrary to the prejudice that all of them were wealthy, the greatest number of Jews was middle class. There were also some in the lower class of clerks and workers. The period of stability and prosperity of Osijek was abruptly broken by the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. Osijek Jews suddenly had to deal with insecurity due to frequent robberies and the fact that their business associates suddenly became scattered in the newly created states. However, after the stabilization, Jews continued to contribute to the town's development. In 1929, the Yugoslav king Aleksandar Karađorđević declared them equal citizens, and the census 2 years later recorded that as many as 70% of Croatian Jews declared Croatian as their mother tongue. This figure also shows a high level of integration into society. According to the 1931 census, more than 4,300 Jews lived in Osijek, and they comprised almost 11% of the town's population. Not long after, the position of Jews began to deteriorate with the overflow of anti-Semitism from Hitler's Germany. Members of Osijek German population began to promote Nazism, and soon the development of Jewish communities and the entire multi-ethnic society was brought to an end. Immediately after the proclamation of the Nazi puppet state called Independent State of Croatia in April 1941, the way was paved to total destruction of Jews. The first 30 Osijek Jews were arrested only a few days after the establishment of the new state. Today, it might be hard to believe that ceremonial book burnings were once organized in this square. It was known as Ante Pavelić Square back then. Book burnings targeted Jewish authors, but also other authors whose writings seemed to oppose the Nazism. Simultaneously, anti-Jewish speeches and songs resounded the town. In May 1941, Jews and Serbs were deported from the elite parts of the town so that the high officials of politics or military could occupy their houses and flats. The next step was the expulsion of Jews from all important institutions. The town's hospital was no exception. With the irony of fate, having fired all Jewish doctors, the authorities soon had to face general shortage of doctors. In 1942, they had to address Italian military institutions for help. Jews were also expelled from high schools, while primary school students had to sit in separate desks and carry a patch with the Croatian letter Ž. Over time, anti-Jewish regulations became even more bizarre. Jews were soon banned from entering restaurants, cafes, theaters and cinemas. They were allowed to go shopping only after 10 a.m. and visit barber shops or hairdressers only between 10:30 and noon. Gradually, they were forbidden to even pass through the town center, first after 6 p.m. and later completely. Similarly, only 2 Jews were allowed to walk down the street at once. The authorities also organized public works to humiliate Jewish citizens. Some of the passers-by used such opportunities to make offensive comments, but there were also those who secretly brought food and water while the guards were not watching. At the same time, a great looting of Jewish property took place. Ustasha officials, politicians and policemen often busted into Jewish houses and flats, stealing everything from artwork to clothing and footwear. Eventually, even the state had to react by adopting a measure which prohibited entering Jewish houses without a written order. In October 1941, a law was passed that made all Jewish property state-owned. Jewish companies were left to commissionaires, mostly unqualified people. As they had little knowledge of economics, most companies went bankrupt shortly after. New German and Croatian commissionaires usually just sold off large stocks of items and commodities in order to provide short-term profit. One of the most obvious examples of a respectable company's devastation is the Hotel Royal. Since its foundation, it was known for high-quality service and classy ambience. When World War II broke out, the owners of the hotel were two Jewish siblings, Viktor and Julius Gurug. After the authorities confiscated the hotel and changed its name to Velebit, the new commissioner pledged himself to remove the Jewish spirit and influence from it. When the war ended, the hotel was briefly returned to the surviving brother, Julius Gurug. But soon, the communist authorities confiscated the hotel again, under the accusation that occupiers were sleeping in it during the war. No need to mention that the paradox could not have been bigger. However, the communists did seize the hotel, and Gurug had to seek out new life in Zagreb, where he became maître d'hôtel of the hotel's palace and esplanade. Later, he held the same position in Opatija in the Kvarner Hotel. His former hotel, the Royal, has never reached old glory again. Its quality declined with time, which led to complete closure during the privatization in the modern Croatian state. At this very place, between Osijek and the suburb of Tenja, a Jewish concentration camp was established in June 1942. The camp was fenced with a barbed wire, and about 2,500 Osijek citizens were kept there, along with 500 Jews from other places. Due to the lack of barracks, many detainees had to sleep outdoors. The concentration camp was in operation until August of the same year, when the most detainees were transferred to Auschwitz. Between 100 and 300 people were also transported to Jasenovac's extermination camp. In August, former Jewish nursing home in Lower Town was also discharged. While the guards were escorting mostly elderly Jews to the railway station, some of their fellow citizens were making offensive remarks, whereas others started to cry, having seen their former neighbors suffering. Upon the arrival at the station, the Jews were squeezed into cattle wagons and transported to Auschwitz, where children and the sick were immediately taken to gas chambers. Only 10 Osijek Jews managed to survive deportation to the camps. If you happen to wonder why more people didn't try to escape from the town on time, the reason lies in the fact that Jews were banned from even accessing the railway station building. However, individuals did manage to escape to the Italian occupation zone of Croatia in 1941. In order to arrive there, they needed forged documents and a trustworthy person who would take them out of the town illegally, usually at night. After 1942, deportations started even in the Italian occupation zone, so the only option was to flee across the Drava River into then Hungary, which was also extremely dangerous. Still, the main reason why more Jews did not flee was their high level of integration. In the beginning, they simply dismissed every notion of the evil that was about to happen to them. After the deportation was completed, only about 300 Jews remained in the town. These were the converts, people married to the so-called Aryans. A small number also survived thanks to the aid of their non-Jewish acquaintances, and 2 citizens of Osijek were later awarded the title Righteous among the Nations. However, the survivors soon had to face another disillusion. New communist authorities decided to nationalize all pre-war factories, workshops and shops without any compensation. Thus, people were suddenly left not only without their properties, but also without sources of income. In the light of that, it's no wonder that 280 Jews moved to Israel as soon as the Jewish Communities Union offered them such possibility. Formally, former Jewish properties were returned to their owners only after the establishment of democratic Croatia in the 1990s. This act, however, found many survivors in distant countries like Israel or the United States, whereas in many cases there were no more living descendants. After the war, the synagogue in Upper Town was completely destroyed. The Lower Town synagogue was also devastated. As the Jewish community did not have the resources for its restoration, they sold the building, which is why the synagogue today serves as the Evangelical Church of the Annunciation. The Jewish community of Osijek is still active today, in the building which served as a Jewish school until 1941. The descendants of Osijek Jews, especially the children, are no longer committed just to Judaism. And we can say that Judaism represents only a fragment of their heritage. The building itself houses the Faculty of Law today, and only a few rooms belonged to the Jewish community. All documents that sentenced Croatian Jews to death, deportation, or confiscation of property ended up with the notorious Ustasha salute, meaning "for homeland ready." With the same salute, many Osijek Jews, Serbs and anti-fascists were shot by bullets here, in present-day King Tomislav Park. This rather neglected memorial is the only reminder of these events. Nowadays, revisionists occasionally try to find excuses for the role of Croatian fascists. That's why it's even more important to talk about these disgraceful events. Besides, as 86% of the population of Croatia declare themselves as Roman Catholics, I believe that a single doubt about the true character of the so-called independent state of Croatia can be released by a brief recalling of God's fifth commandment. We will finish this video in Ljudevit Gaj Square, in front of the monument to the victims of fascism. Its original name was Humanity, and it was made by sculptor Oskar Nemon, an Osijek-born Jew who emigrated to England before World War II. The message of a mother who elevates a child symbolizes eternal man's hope in a bright future. As the author himself pointed out, the one who is capable of casting a stone on a mother with a child is either a crazy person or a criminal.